Enneagram fixo numero sixo tends to be the one people find it most difficult to wrap their heads around, and I don't blame them. Sixes are slippery. Sometimes the six is described as the loyal soldier who seeks purpose and community. Other times the six is described as the paranoid conspiracy theorist who will stop at nothing to root out inauthenticity. These feel like two different types, but the Enneagram says they're the same. Is this a degree of sloppiness on the Enneagram's part? Yeah, somewhat. If sixes can be so different from each other, then why not just make a couple new dots in the fear cluster to delineate the obviously different coping strategies you've lumped under one number? The Enneagram is not some piece of divine revelation, it's just, I gotta make sure I know what delineate means, hold on. To describe or portray something precisely. Nice. The Enneagram is not some piece of divine revelation. It's just a general system of grouping we invented to help us navigate life, and to create a tool like that, you have to cut some corners. All models are false, some are useful. I just think somewhere in the development of the Enneagram, someone cut one corner too many, and now we're left with some blurry lines that we just gotta deal with. I might be exaggerating a bit though, I can still give the six spiel. Someone with a type 6 fixation is fundamentally afraid of the world, whether they know it or not. Whereas a 5 experiences this fear and turns inward, a 6 will feel this fear and turn outward. 6s look for something solid, something certain, and attach themselves to it. It could be a group, it could be an individual, it could be an institution, it could be an ideology, including the ideology of being anti-institution. The point is that sixes are context people.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
They need to know where they stand in relation to the world around them because that's the only way they can alleviate their fear. It's easy to see how the paranoid, truth-seeking Dipper Pines type 6 fits into all of this, but at the same time, again, sixes can apparently be the complete opposite. They can be people who go all in on a cause, people of unshakable faith and loyalty without a skeptical bone in their bodies. And it's hard for me to see a Dipper 6 slipping into that mode. At first, I wondered if it was a matter of maturity or health. Like I wondered if the paranoid sixes were just healthier versions of the all-in sixes who had exhausted their skepticism and traded it in for a simple answer. But that doesn't sound right because the paranoid sixes can suck balls too. Turns out these two types of sixes have names. The loyal soldier community member sixes are called phobic sixes, and the skeptical expose the danger sixes are called counterphobic sixes. Counterphobic sixes can even go so far as to live a completely anarchistic adrenaline junkie lifestyle, which at a glance doesn't make them look like a fear type at all. But what these counterphobic, boundary-breaking, offensive sixes are really doing is trying to conquer their fear. The people in the angry mob, a lot of them are probably sixes, but the person who started the angry mob, the person who climbed up on a stump and said, "We have to destroy the whatever," that's a counterphobic 6, or an 8 or a 1, but probably a counterphobic 6. You can tell 6 leaders apart from non-6 leaders because 6 leaders believe their own propaganda. When they say we have to destroy the whatever, they mean that shit. They believe in that cause. With an 8 leader or a 3 leader, you never know if it's a psyop, but 6s, they believe in the thing 100%. Thus, stories about truth tend to be 5 or 6 coded. 6s are often the most political people, not in the sense that they involve themselves in politics, but they like to think and talk about power structures, and who's out to get me and how can I keep myself safe. 6s can have quite the victim complex. Whether or not they're actually victims is irrelevant. That is their interpretation of reality. I am not safe, forces much larger and more powerful than me are out there, what am I gonna do? Which is the same base as 5s and 7s, but 6s will deal with it relationally. They pick sides, or they assign blame. They might say it's a matter of right and wrong, but if they're at the super unhealthy end, it is almost certainly a matter of us and them. So the most common 6 stories are us versus them stories, tales of causes and loyalty. The 6 will be a part of the machine. That machine will be their entire identity. And faction is good because some justification. But then they'll fill in the blank, fall in love, discover a dark secret, find their confidence, whatever it is, and they'll leave the machine. Positive growth for the 6 means leaving the machine, abandoning their post, going rogue. Maybe it's to join a better cause, maybe it's to do away with causes altogether, to stand on their own 2 feet in an uncertain world. 6s are also super tricky to identify in fiction because the 6 complex just scales differently. It's so hard to pin down an exact 6 personality that you often have to look beyond the person and at the situation they're dealing with to know if it's a 6 story. Tla's Prince Zuko is one of the many victims of the type 4 overdiagnosis crisis. I'm gonna unpack that whole situation in the 4 video, but Zuko is most definitely not a 4, he's a 6. Sure, maybe he's moody like a stereotypical 4, but look at the context of his storyline. Loyalty, duty, roles, his story is 100% six coded, even if he doesn't have a stereotypical six personality. And to me, when I'm assigning a type, the overall coding of the story takes precedence over the vibe of the character. A lot of people ask the wrong questions when trying to find a person's type. It's not about personality, it's about pathology. Look at their bad choices. What type of bullshit does the character have? If you wanted to further categorize Zuko, his loyalty issues primarily centering around one person make him a sexual or 1-to-1 6, but he is most certainly a 6. His arc centers around him letting go of what once gave him certainty and purpose and standing up for what's right. That is a classic positive 6 story. The negative 6 story is the regression into the system or whatever their attachment point is. Any military is a 6 institution, so with someone like H. Barry O, you get a military dude. Barry has PTSD, his fears make him vulnerable, and he gets manipulated into putting his faith into someone else. But then he finds his individuality through acting, and everything is great until his past catches up to him. He regresses back through dogmatic attachment until he becomes a full-on religious zealot, and, spoilers, he lives happily ever after. Another 6 tragedy is Henry Hill from Goodfellas and also The Real Life Show.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Henry just wants to belong, to be a part of the club, and he stoops to some very low lows in the name of loyalty to this club. But then the club goes to shit, Henry loses his support system, he slips into drug-fueled paranoia, and he eventually debases his entire identity to keep himself safe. Prior to the horrors, Allison Hightower was a 6. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a more complete picture of 6ness in one character. Allison's life revolves around the roles she believes she's meant to play in society. Wife, mother, queen. One of her defining story beats is the moment she commits to her own family, the Hightowers, and stands apart from the Targaryens. Allison clings to a sense of religious duty, and it's not a psyop or a manipulation tactic. She's genuinely religious. Over and over again, we see her turning to her faith as a coping mechanism. Her demeanor is nervous and jittery and tightly wound. In the earlier episodes of Season 1, she's paranoid about Rhaenyra's loyalty, and in the later episodes, she's paranoid about Rhaenyra's entire family.
She can move to cut off any challenge to her succession.
Then I won't.
You are the challenge! You are the challenge, Aegon! Simply by living and breathing!
Everything is us versus them with her. Her story revolves around loyalty to the people and institutions around her. And so, hot take, I think it makes sense that they would try to do a stepping away from the system thing with her in Season 2. Yeah, it's way too intense of a change for it to be believable, but that is the axis of growth for her character. Not allowing her son to be killed, obviously, but thinking for herself in general. Yeah, I understand that angle, even though I'd probably prefer a regression arc as that's more in line with her book character. Anywho, Katniss is a 6. The first Hunger Games book is kind of just all one big save the cat moment for her, but as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that this is a tale of systems and how a person fits into one, and the final leg of her story sees her breaking out of the system and setting things right. 6 relationship stories. Great question that no one asked. The only full-on 6 love story that comes to mind is, I don't know if you guys remember Paper Towns from like 2014, but that's a story that combines 6ness with romantic obsession in a really cool way. Taking that certainty, purpose complex and applying it to another human being. The goober that wrote Paper Towns is also a 6. John, I literally gave you my business card. I wrote my personal cell on the back. John, you have to call me. This is an actual interaction that happened between me and John Green at VidCon. I will strike again, John. You will not be able to resist my business cards. Stories about fear in general usually pertain to the 6 complex. Even something as simple as a child finding the courage to walk into their dark closet. I'd be like, yep, that's 6 coded. Involves fear, check. Object of fear is material and external, check. That's 6 enough for me. But with such a broad range of personalities tied to the 6 fixation, you might be thinking, right, so how is any of this helpful? I can write a story about loyalty or certainty, but I do have to actually write the character too, Lucas. I can't say much beyond this. 6s tend to have a tension to them, even the most self-assured ones. When they get into a real shit scenario, you can see the tightness and the panic behind their eyes. The head type energy is always just a little above the shoulders, jittery. 6s can certainly get angry, but their anger usually has an undercurrent of stress to it. It's not like physical gut type anger or teary-eyed heart type anger. It's more like cornered dog anger. A modern 6 you see a lot is like that bartender with gauges and tattoos, bottom lip packed with Zin, and he just makes your drink really fast and he looks stressed as hell and you're like, hey buddy, how's your night going? And he's like, capitalism. And you're like, understandable, have a good night. But you see what I mean though? Just describing that guy doesn't automatically cause a story to spring to mind. This is why I say there's a disconnect between 6 people and 6 stories. With a 3, you can see the 3-ness and you can identify it as a flaw and you can be like, oh, this person needs to do something humbling and willingly compromise their image. Same with every other type, the negatives are obvious. But with 6s, it's different because they're low-key right. Like if you dropped every type onto a desert island, and let's assume each of these are the most unhealthy, most absolute versions of their respective types, meaning the 3 is only allowed to do 3 things, the 9 is only allowed to do 9 things, etc. And you just set all of these types loose in the most dangerous environment possible. 8 probably survives, maybe 5, but definitely 6. Who would have thought that the coping strategy of seeking objective safety from external threats would be helpful in a scenario with a bunch of external threats? Crazy. But that experiment isn't realistic. The reality is we all play the 6 to some extent in our lives, when we're around potential dangers or in an unfamiliar situation. Remember, people have all 9 types of bullshit inside of them, but the fact that we all have to be 6s a little bit on a day-to-day basis also contributes to the blurriness of this type. The 6 instinct is the survival instinct. It's the fight or flight response, and it can be refracted through relationships, ideologies, all sorts of personalities, but at its core, that's what it is. It's what is the safe option. So a true 6 is someone whose primary urge in life is that instinct, whatever that means in context. Some say type cannot change. I think it sort of can, but I also don't see the point of it because then that's a new character. But hypothetically, fight or flight trauma could instill 6 tendencies. Sarah Connor in T2 comes to mind. Like, I buy her in that movie. Not the same character as the previous movie, but I buy her in that movie. I think it's for the best that 6s don't have an easy to stereotype personality. They're the last type people learn because they're the only type you can't get by on a surface level interpretation of. You have to ask why, otherwise your mental picture of 6s will be very obviously incomplete. 6s are a gateway drug into the real Enneagram, and I love them for that. So yeah, with 6 stories, the key themes are allegiance, truth, purpose, systems, conspiracies, and at the deepest level, objective physical survival. The 6 character themselves can range from angsty, suspicious, and on edge to completely certain and blindly loyal. But both of these extremes are points of unhealth for the 6. Ideally, they stop operating from fear together, instead finding bravery and taking a leap of faith. Okay, that's the 6. I did my best. Just checking in. How we doing? Good? Good. Oh, me? Honestly, I'm freaking out a little bit because I just realized backwards hats look like pickup trucks. But otherwise, yeah, I'm chilling. I'm gonna go eat some banana bread, so I'll see you around.